of the Doctor by Doctor Coaching Group webinar. We are a group of healthcare doctors trained as coaches, and now we coach other healthcare doctors in the clinical and industry settings. We'll be coming to you on the fourth Wednesday of each month with a topic in healthcare coaching. This week, we'll start at the beginning with the topic, what is coaching in healthcare? While we're waiting for everyone to join us, please type into the chat your name and where you're located. Remember on Zoom chat to select panelists and attendees so everyone can see your comments, or if you want to send something only to us, choose the panelists only option. We've got some folks from Columbus, Ohio, Buffalo, New York, Redwood City, California, Boston and Dallas, Kalamazoo, Michigan, Charlotte, North Carolina, Old Westbury, New York, Texas, Tampa Bay, Summit, New Jersey, Reddington, New Jersey, great. Well, we appreciate every one of you being here. We'll give people a few more minutes here just to log in with Zoom. All right, today it is my pleasure to talk with Dr. Mark Monane. Mark is the Chief Medical Officer at the Monane Group Clinical Consulting. Mark is a seasoned physician, consultant, and an executive coach. He's certified as a healthcare leadership coach and an associate certified coach from the International Coaching Federation. Mark's coaching work focuses on improving physician well-being in the clinical setting and leadership and executive coaching in the life sciences arena. For our viewers who stay until the end of the webinar, Mark has a great free offer for you. With that, Mark, welcome to the show.
Heath, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
For today's format, Mark and I will start with some introductory comments, and then I will follow up with some questions of my own. And lastly, we'll move to your questions from the chat. Remember, it's never too early to start typing questions using the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. So Mark, take it away.
Thanks so much, Heath. Thanks everybody for joining us today. At the end of the session, we hope all the attendees will achieve the following objectives. Hopefully you'll be able to differentiate between coaching, consulting, and therapy. There are three terms that are out there. They're used interchangeably. They really shouldn't be. They are related, and we'll go over the differences and set up the framework. Grasp the concepts of the coaching process and the typical coaching session. So we'll go over what it's like to engage a coach, what the goal should be of the coaching session overall, and then how you can make progress with each individual session. And to understand the relevance of coaching to healthcare professionals, both in the clinical as well as the academic and industry settings. I think there's relevance in all these settings, as well as the overall goal of coaching, which is really to increase the productivity and the effectiveness. And we're going to focus in the purpose of this discussion on the work environment. I'll leave you with some take-home points, which I'll present right now as a preview. First take-home point is that coaching is not equal to consulting and not equal to therapy. We talked about before, these terms are used together. We'll help you differentiate them. Coaching is not equal to the disruptive doctor. And when I say doctor here, for the purpose of this presentation, as well as for the purpose of this presentation, we're talking about a DO, an MD, PhD, PharmD. We're talking about DNP. We're talking about anybody in the senior healthcare professional here. And coaching really isn't about the disruptive doctor. That's coaching folklore that somebody's being punished. It's really a gift. Coaching is meant to be used by organizations, to reward their rising stars, to help them to get to the next level, because everybody needs a little bit of help every once in a while. And why would an organization spend money on bad actors? They wouldn't. Lastly, I hope to leave you with coaching session. Every coaching session has a desired outcome. And here's one of my favorite definitions from one of my favorite teachers, Andrew Netlick from the Center for Executive Coaching, where he describes coaching as an efficient And when I say efficient, I mean that there's not a lot of textbooks, it's not an analysis or reports, big thick reports that you see in consulting. It's high impact. There's short sessions. Every session has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and an outcome that's desirable. It's a dialogue where the coachee is really supposed to talk 75% of the time, where the coach is 25% of the time. It's for high performing people that we talked about before, results oriented. And what we're trying to do is build habits that will last the individual for a long period of time. The first point in more details. Here you see the relationship of counseling, coaching, therapy, mentoring, and consulting. If you look at the bottom, uh, focusing on therapy, mentoring, and consulting, it's really about telling the client. So the expertise is in the individual who's delivering the information, their knowledge, their experience, very important there. That's in contrast to counseling and coaching, which is really question-based, not telling, but an interactive dialogue. And here, it's really the client or the coachee's knowledge and experiences that's going to be really valuable. Counseling and therapy on the left are really related to the past. What worked for you before? How did it make you feel? That is not where coaching is. Coaching and mentoring consulting is in the future. How can we get set up for success going forward? What's the next step that we can take to make things better? And it's really focused on the future. So what I want you to remember is coaching up top and to the right, focused on the future, focused on an active dialogue, active inquiry between the coach and the coachee, with the coachee doing the majority of speaking. Coaching is not centered around disruptive doctor. Coaching is centered around disruption in every doctor's work. Clearly, there was disruption even before COVID, but many of the same variables are present and new variables are present now. It's focused on rising stars, as we talked about before. Again, why would an organization pay for bad actors? It's designed to address new roles and functions. And for example, the person who's a company maybe where they're going from preclinical to a clinical orientation, or maybe at a hospital where they're opening up a new unit, that's going to be key here. And again, goal-oriented, improving efficiency of the individual. And we're also going to do a little bit discussion on teams as well, because we'll try to spend some time talking about engaging and mobilizing the team, which is very important for gaining success. And we'll stay away from the disruptive doctor. Last take-home point is every coaching session begins with the following. And here's a glimpse into the coaching process and what each session looks like. For first, the topic is driven by the coachee. And again, there should be an open-ended question that starts it. And the question might be, what could we do to make this the best 30 minutes of your week? What can we do to make this the best 30 minutes of the week? Then we move to a desired outcome. What's the desired outcome for you, the coachee, for the session? Defined again by the coachee, and something that's doable within the 30 minutes or 1 hour you're spending. How will you know if you get there? What does success look like for that outcome? That's the third question to ask in the beginning of each session and to discuss. And once you get there, how meaningful is this? Why is this important for you? And for those of you who are old school, and I'm all about old school, it's the S and O of the SOAP note. So here we are. I'm sorry, we're at a review now. It's no longer a preview. My apologies. Coaching is not equal to consulting, is not equal to therapy. We're at the review stage. 3 important terms, but that are differentiated. Focusing on rising stars, making people better for themselves and their organizations. And a quick definition of coaching, again, outcomes oriented. And what I want you to get is that the outcomes for coaching are very similar to a primary outcome for a clinical trial, or perhaps patient satisfaction. There are metrics that can be followed quantitatively and often, laid out ahead of time, and you can see how you did towards that outcome.
Thanks, Mark, for the great information on coaching. If I may, I'd like to follow up with some questions of my own. What type of things do doctors typically want to work on with a coach?
That's a great question. I would say that in the doctor by doctor coaching group, we've come in contact with a few situations which I think are highly relevant here. For example, it could be a chief nursing officer that's very interested in time and task management. Again, COVID has new challenges, but even before that, just managing the flow in the nursing station is really, really important. So that could be from a chief nursing officer. We could see behavioral coaching. For example, you can see the physician, the resident or fellow who picked up some bad habits during his or her training, and now is going to a more administrative role and needs to let go of these bad habits. Obstetrician that is looking at an associate chief role, and how does she potentially get there? The idea of what relationships does she have? That's her power base. And how could she leverage that power base? And how to have an influence conversation with those individuals that are their power base to help her move to the next level. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about, these are all individual, let's talk a little bit about groups. Again, the goal of a group, a medical affairs department, or maybe a neurology group is to engage and mobilize your team towards a specific goal. But there also can be mastermind sessions where peers get together, facilitated by a coach, getting to the outcomes. When your water is spouting out of your bathroom sink, you need a plumber, right? It's not a question. But finding out when you need a coach is a little bit more complicated. So hopefully I've addressed some of these questions and opportunities.
Great. Those all seem like important areas. How do you know that coaching is actually working for the person being coached?
So a couple of ways I think about it. And I think this is another coaching folklore number two. The first one is disruptive physician coaching folklore. Number two is that coaching is, wishy-washy. It's only qualitative. It doesn't have outcomes, but that's not accurate. I think we described that each session, there's a couple of open-ended questions towards the outcome that you want to see for that individual session. So that's very important in getting to the important outcome and seeing did you get to that outcome? Is it working? You know that right away. And in the beginning of the process, there should be some sort of coaching agreement. We're looking for a long-term benefit here, maybe learning how to mobilize your team, getting your employees more engaged, developing into a leadership role, getting that leadership role. So you could see some benefits or some ways to know whether it's working in the near term after each session. And then as part of the coach agreement, which is very important to set up in the beginning, it's a confidential agreement that's set down by the coach and the coachee, not the organization, on what that goal should be. And you can see how well you did.
Interesting. So in practice, most doctors are familiar with concepts of evidence-based medicine. Is there actually any evidence that coaching really works?
So yeah, I would have to say that it's definitely emerging science, but there's some encouraging data and findings that are quoted in the literature. If you go to the International Coaching Federation website, they'll often talk about a return of investment of about $4 to $8. $48 for every dollar spent. So that's one way of looking at it. In addition, there's real world evidence, benefits to the organization that we talked about, benefits of getting rid of some bad habits, which are more anecdotal, but still important. Probably the best quoted paper or relatively recent paper that is very well cited is a JAMA article. Came out, I believe, in 2019 that talked about a coaching intervention within a hospital where in as little as 6 sessions, and I believe the sessions were about a half an hour each, 6 sessions, they were able to achieve marked improvements in a pre-post design in physician well-being and decrements in signs and symptoms of burnout. So this is, but I would say, Heath, it's definitely an emerging literature.
Great. It's all really helpful. We've got some questions actually from our viewers that I'd like to ask. A couple of these are similar. First question, how does one choose a coach that's right for them?
That's a really good question. I would say that generally in terms of profile, you want somebody who's been there and done that. I think it could be very helpful, in healthcare, to have another have a healthcare coach who has shown some success in the career or in the area that you're interested in. So that's a good place to start. In addition, credentials we talked about before, having credentials as a coach is structured curriculum, just like the outcomes of each session are structured. There's several curriculum which are very structured, and you might want to ask about that as well. You have an introductory session with the individual. You want that person to be a listener. We talked about before, the coachee should be talking about 75% of the time. That also means the coachee should be doing 75% of the work. I guess the biggest differentiator might be like finding a tennis coach, right? You don't really want to find, this is not, the coach that you're looking for is not a sports coach. Sports coaches are generally, do a lot of contracting, scheduling, in managing. That's what they're doing. I meant, you really want, that's a sports coach. But a coach that we're talking about here, is a coach who really will sit down with you and go over the recordings, ask you to rate, how you're doing, like from 1 to 10 after seeing the recording. Maybe they got a 7. They said, well, what would a 10 look like? How would we get there? So that's really that the person who asks those kinds of questions, I think, and thinks about, interactions are really going to be really important here.
So another question from our viewers: what does a session with a coach look like? Is it one and done, or is this something that typically takes more time?
Yeah. So if I may, I don't, if I may, I would say the answer is yes. I would say that's probably the best answer. What do I mean? One and done. Every session should have a beginning, a middle, and end. And we spent some time already talking about the beginning. So the beginning would be, how is this the best half hour of your week? And we're hoping that this is a great half hour for our attendees. What is the outcome of each session? What does success look like? And then why is that meaningful to you? That's the beginning. The end of every session should also be structured. And so the end of the session could be, the A and P of the SOAP note. So the end of the section looks like, how did it go for you? Or how did you do? Not how did we do? How did you do? Because the emphasis, again, should be on the coachee. Second question you might want to ask is, what was the best part of the session? And therefore you can record and document, what really worked. And so you can remember that for next time. And then there's the accountability phase. What are you going to do for till next week? And I think that's really important, because that sets the stage for success during the next session. So it's that beginning, middle, and end. It's the open-ended questions, active inquiry in the beginning, active inquiry at the end. That's really important. But in terms of engagement, the length of the engagement, whether it's a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year, really depends on the coachee and the coach, what they're looking for in terms of the problem. How important is the problem? How urgent is the problem? What's the new opportunity there? And so that's really designed in the beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. Another question from our viewers: what are the attributes of a great coach?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about that before. I would say somebody who's been there and done that, somebody who you feel comfortable with. The coach is meant to be there, to be an advocate, but also, to give you feedback. Generally is rooting for you, but making sure that you do the work. They're not going to do the work for you. So it's really that balancing between coaching, between consulting that we talked about, where you have an expert come in, versus using the coachee as the expert, because and focusing on being the facilitator. I mean, in a lot of times during the sessions, some coachees will say, well, what would you do? And that's really tough, right? Because what would you do is, putting on it's hard to know exactly what you would do in that situation, and you're not there. If they're insistent, you may say, I'll step out. Let's step out of the coaching. I'll take off my coaching hat, and then you could give some advice. But that should be rare. That should be rare. You want somebody who's active and engaging you, but you don't want somebody to give you the answers.
Great. Mark, we have time for one more question from our viewers, and it comes down to that question that we all expect. How much does coaching cost?
No, okay. That one I was ready for, and that's an important one, and I think it's a great question, and it's a very practical question. Like coaching should be very, very practical question. So the way I would think about this is really talk about probably the first underlying rule of coaching, and that is, who needs a coach? Why even get a coach? Why get involved? It has. I would say that a question to ask the coachee and for the coachee to think about is how big is the opportunity? How rewarding can it be at the end once I've achieved that outcome? How meaningful that is. Really setting the stage of a important, relevant opportunity or perhaps a challenge that needs to be addressed, because coaching requires time on the basis of the coachee as well as the coach. It involves energy. And I talked about before, it's really the coachee that does the work. And there's the financial cost. And whether it's paid for by the organization or the individual, I hope you'll agree, Heath, all three elements are really important. I hope the attendees agree. So that's really how I think about cost. Asking the first question is it a big enough problem to engage a coach? And then during the coaching agreement, which we talked about in the beginning, there should be some firm milestones that are put out, not only for the desired metrics, but also for cost considerations as well.
Great. Thanks for answering those, Mark. I know you gave us some preview and summary points earlier. Any additional summary points you'd like for our viewers today?
Sure. A couple things. One is a question on, is healthcare coaching different from other coaching? I think that's a question that we in our group have asked ourselves at Doctor by Doctor Coaching. And I would say that the answer is there's some special relevance. So I would say the answer is yes, to the doctor, especially in healthcare. The quadruple aim, which is a highly relevant theme, is out there. That theme talks about physician wellness, well-being, avoiding burnout. That's really important. So that's put in. We talked about the dialogue being highly efficient, impactful. Those short bursts in the short sessions, whether it's half an hour or an hour, they're meant to be very well driven. I think clinicians and doctors are trained, to have those short bursts of energy and interaction that could be very productive. And generally, I think doctors can be very coachable because of this. I think it's a little different for those are the ways that it's a little different. Ways it's not so different is, again, it's the beginning and the middle of the end. It's the coaching contract in the beginning. It's active inquiry, the dialogue that we talked about. So those things are the same. So that's one thing I want to leave people with. And then I'd like to leave people with the fact that there's metrics associated with coaching, just like a clinical trial, just like a patient satisfaction survey. There's the question about the applications in healthcare. I think we've talked about that just now. And I guess the third one is that everybody needs a little support to move the ball forward. And having a coach can really help you either get to the level that you're going to get to faster with less friction, or potentially getting to a higher level than you would before at the same time. So that's what I'd like to leave our audience with.
Mark, thank you very much. You've given us a lot of great information on coaching and how it can benefit healthcare professionals. And for our viewers who've stayed till the end, we thank you for that. Mark has a very generous offer to tell you about now.
Terrific. Thanks, Heath. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm Mark Monane. I have an offer for today's attendees. I want to thank you very much for your time and energy and spending with us. have special offer. You can reach me with any questions or comments. Love to hear from you at info@doctorbydoctorcoaching.com, or you can send me a message on LinkedIn. My name and affiliations are listed here. You know, it's the 7th month of the year, July, and just past the fabulous 4th of July holiday. So I'm going to structure my offer according to those themes here too. So for the first 7 people that write to me at LinkedIn or through email, I'm going to offer a complimentary coaching session. See if there is an opportunity here. See if it's a good question for coaching. See if you like it. Complimentary session. I hope it will be productive. I'll give that for the first 7 people who reach out to me, and one more offer. But wait, there's more. For the first 4 people that sign up, given it's the 4th of July holiday, 47% discount on a coaching package. So love to hear with comments. The group is very interested in your feedback as a result of this webinar. And then again, if you want to reach out, learn more about coaching, happy to do that.
Mark, that's really great. Thanks for the fantastic offer for our viewers. So remember, everyone that attended today, we want to thank you for that. You can find a link to this recording on our LinkedIn and our YouTube pages, Doctor by Doctor Coaching Group. You can also follow us on LinkedIn each week for summaries, polls, and articles on more topics. And finally, you can reach out to us on our LinkedIn page to ask questions and help us plan for future webinars. We want to know what you're interested in and what you'd like to hear about when it comes to coaching into healthcare. And as a reminder, our next webinar will be on Wednesday, August 25th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. At that time, Dr. Angela Owens will talk to Dr. Marika Yonkman on what is a mastermind group. So I'm Dr. Heath Jolliff, and from everyone at Doctor by Doctor Coaching Group, thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar. And remember, stay well and thrive.